Hello, this is the Harboring Light. I'm Mary. I give a conservative perspective about the world around me. Feedback is immensely important. Feel free to reach out to me. The best way to do that is first through email and then again through YouTube. Alright, so I'm on a lot of different audio platforms, so it won't be hard to find me. Okay, so on to the topic of choice here. Now, I am going to give my thoughts about the comic book, The Mask, and then I'm going to talk about the movie. Here we go. Oh, wow. The comic book and the movie, The Mask. And even the series. I remember me growing up watching the series. It's insane how the comic book and the conception into a movie was ever able to be done. It's just the power and a really good example, the aspects of when you really understand your audience and you have the respect of what limitation means. Now, what do I mean by this? So, now I was trying to find the comic book that explains with us that's actually focusing in on Stanley Ipkiss, which Jim Carrey was. We were graced by his amazing talents to bring that character to life in the movie. But you know how it goes with things that are online where you have it and then it gets omitted off. But anyway, fortunately enough, I was able to find a 1991 version that is even more based on, I would say, the transition that I think they pulled a lot from the way in which Jim Carrey showcased himself as the Mask. And that's more evident in the 1991 version. And I'll have a source for you to look at if you're interested in reading it. So anyway, what it does is it goes through a journey and explains to you, because we're in the reality situation of the aftermath of the Mask coming back, because unfortunately, with Stanley Ipkiss, he found the Mask, and I'm going to resurface this again because I'm sure there's a lot of fan theories that goes around this, and then even more aspects and details about it. But anyway, that's beside the point. I want to get on a tangent here. And so what this particular comic book does is make a lot of social commentary about the aspects of power and control, and the aspects where ultra violence can, explain about the world, and which greed and corruption is really prevalent in the thing in this town. And this can even be a symbolism of the aspects of, the landscape of law and order, especially in that generation. And so, interesting enough, the main character And the comic book version, he is a cop who was really pissed off at the fact that there was so much corruption in his own division. There was so much, it was just like gangs controlling the city. And so Stanley Ipkiss, his girlfriend, the evidence of the mask is already admitted. So, spoiler alert, I gotta do it. So the thing about Stanley Ipkiss in the comic book, when he puts on the mask, it is weird because it's one of those things that was very interesting, and it was explained quite clearly in an interpretation I remember when, and it's when you hear somebody has another perspective, it's quite interesting. So I'm going to relay this back into what I think that was making a commentary on, and why, comic books. So I've said this before, and I'm gonna say it again. I'm gonna reiterate it again. So when I was in college, unfortunately, you know how you have to go through and shit through the BS introductory classes. And so there was this one class that I took. It was called World Cultures or whatever, right? And so there was this one movie where it would go in between reality and in between cartoon shit or animation. And so one student was clever enough to say, from her point of view, she said, well, she thinks the reason why that they're showing violence, ultra violence in a cartoon way, which, other people have said that, who make, more grounded, well-rounded professional critiques. I'm not saying that what she didn't do was not professional. I'm just saying that she wasn't like that's not her trade, but it's just profound what she said. So anyway, she was saying that I think the whole reason why, because we had to, give our thoughts about the scene and why techniques were used. So she was saying the whole reason why she thinks the use of animation was seen or used in this particular scene is to strip it away from the power that is of actually the visually seeing, violence. Because if you see it in a cartoon version, it doesn't. It gives it less power, so it's not really implemented there. You don't really have the full effect. It's sort of as if it doesn't desensitize you. And that's what's really interesting about the aspects of comic books and our cultural landscape. Now, comic books has gotten a really bad reputation since it was, started. It's one of those things that's a means to an end, so to speak, to explain all the problems or whatever with our society at large, to start out with. So going back to my point unfortunately with Stanley Ipkiss, it was his ultimate demise, which means he ultimately had to be killed because the violence succumbed him so much to where his girlfriend had to do it. And that also is, again, giving another, cruel example of the dark realities of a situation where it comes to, because I think it was making commentary from my point of view about the aspects, because I've heard things about it and I'm seeing some facts about it and information about the aspects of feminism and power and the dynamic and disposition about that between the role between a man and a woman in a relationship, and being browbeaten, and because Stanley Ipkiss was the epitome of the aspects of an underdog to the fact to where it seems kind of at some point pathetic. Like, he seems way too meek to where you're saying to yourself, well, man, you got to step up and do something better than you just got to find your disposition. And that was really expelled a lot in his character, and that was probably the point too. So going back to the comic book that I read, when I went through it all and read everything, it really was remnant to me of the aspects of making a lot of commentary about noir, the seediness of that sort of particular type of genre to the 10th degree. Because where you go, Dick Tracy, before then, no, that's another one. That comic book is not child friendly, and it's just amazing how they transitioned all of that, and a lot of depictions that was going on, particularly, when we get into Western films that was making at some point a lot of depictions of noir, it glorified the aspects of the underbelly sometimes. And so I think where in the comic books it said, well, hey, we're gonna just smear your face in it and show you the reality of how brutal and grimy and disgusting it can be. And so also that perplexity of the where that ever-arcing story about a battling in between good and evil was very pronounced in this adaptation of the 1991 version of the comic book, because again, the cop represents what he, in his way, he represents standing up for a good force. And so, he uses this ability to transform himself to take care of business where it's not, putting the law into your own hands. And it's another commentary about the aspects of the harsh reality of that. Now, Frank Miller really did that brought that to gave a very eloquent perspective about that, when in The Watchmen, particularly in Rorschach, right? So it was not pretty the way in which Rorschach, was going. Most of the characters, it was not pretty. They were going about their daily lives as much as they could, but it was very pronounced in Rorschach that this is in itself a mental disorder when you feel like you have to go around finding and protecting justice all the time, taking everything into your hands all the time. And so this got way out of control, relaying this back. This got way out of control when we talk about this in the sense of the Mask in the comic book, where he ultimately tried to justify just outrageous violence, because, it's fine because, they were scumbags anyway, so whatever. But it was starting to pull at him ethically, when he, in his everyday life, to where he ultimately lost the job because it was found out that he was Big Head. Because Big Head was, that was Stanley Ipkiss, is what they were referring to. because he was the one who brought all of this mayhem and destruction when he found that mask. And if I'm not mistaken, that also has a lot of rooted history in the aspects of the Necronomicon. When you bring stuff, everything, and having those. Sam Raimi did that really well with the problems of bringing things from the dead and relaying that back, which is interesting enough. There's supposed to be another Evil Dead coming out this summer. I don't know. It looks like it's gonna be. I wish it the best, but it looks like it's gonna be wow. But we'll see. So anyhow, there's that, and the graphics and the style and the cart and the in which on the panels and the comic book is really good. It really amplifies the aspects and crossing in between, setting up the story plot between the world in which you're living, and then in his mind seeing everything literally as in a war, going back to the time Frank Sinatra, the gangster era, Rat Pack, Dean Martin, all this kind of stuff, because that was the time in which it was glorified, it was cool, it was classy to have that kind of association. Hey, yeah, I have that, like, he's dapper and stylish to look like a wise guy or what have you, right? That's interesting enough. So, with this said, I am going to get into some of the facts and round out everything else. So, with the facts here, okay, so, as I said here, I'm going to go through this. So, now, Dark Horse Comics it was published under Mike Richard and developed by the writer John Arcudi, and the artist was Doug Mackey. So it originally was presented as a Masquerade in '87, and so the origin started in 1985, and also with the aspects of shape-shifting is very pronounced into this. And it might, not to get on a tangent, but it might be one of those weird theories, when I discover and find more about fan theories of the comic book, and then go back and rehash it again with the mask, that something, because I found that interesting enough, something to do with how Necronomicon, and then again the aspects of how maybe Stephen King, the world of Stephen King might be connected. You never know. But anyway, let's get back to this. It says, and so with Stanley Ipkiss is how, again, is how everything is sorted out, because with Stanley Ipkiss and the disposition in which he found it, and which I understand they were saying, and I'll link all the other sources, were saying that, when he found this power, it gave him Looney Tunes, cartoon-like, abilities in order to transform, which is quite interesting because it's making another commentary of the impact that violence and cartoons had on expelling that too, making commentary about that too, because when you look back at Looney Tunes, a lot of the scenes were very pronounced in the aspects of cartoon violence, and then so they, which is Dark Horse, a lot of the comic books that came out from this division of comics made a lot of heavy commentary on the aspects of the dark aftermath of something. So making a lot of, again, with the Looney Tunes and the popularity of it, what if there is a horrible reality situation where countering violence is ultimately very brutal and disgusting. And so this was very pronounced, when we see what with Stanley Ipkiss and everything, and then translating this back again into Lieutenant Mitch and Calloway and everything, what his story and his transformation, and ultimately setting it up for the mask at the end to come back again. And then Kathy is, the girlfriend who was in between all this stuff too. Stanley Ipkiss' girlfriend, and then resurfacing back again in 1991 with the little lieutenant, and trying to be the one to stop and warn, but ultimately, crap hit the fan and it didn't go on so well. So the crossovers and revivals. So the series was concluded and initially run with also a 2000 crossover in the DC Comics, the Joker, in the Joker mask. Now, I also want to add in commentary, as a conservative person, and that's an issue where, things get a bad rap about conservative. There's a fine line between that, but there can be a real problem when you're just being overzealous. Me, as a conservative person, I think that, of course, it's common sense where, don't expose your children to violence and everything. Yeah, of course. But at the same time, when you say, well, adults are saying, well, we're blaming cartoon violence, or blaming video games, or blaming rock music. Triple Gore is a really good example of that. Is a problem in which we blaming everything for our society. That's one of those things where, hey, you really need to step back and get out of yourself and get into the real issue. Is where's what's the home life like for the child? Because if they don't have a suitable home life, then that's going to run the risk of the child, being more prone to violence, being more, deluded, and being more desensitized, right? And that's what is really failing, and a lot of people don't want to make commentary about. And that's the issue in which we're facing today, in which all this stuff being suited up as being normal, trying to push as being normal, being sexualized situations where there's no sense in the reality of the situation it should be involved in. Now, how in the hell are you going to tell me a Pixar movie, Buzz Lightyear is a really good example of that. There's all other countless examples with Disney where very adult themed situations are included in it, and there's no reason to be there but to what? Corrupt an innocent child's mind. And so it's up to the parents to be the guardians to step and say, to not allow these things to be viewed in the home. And that's something to be said about the aspects and disposition when it comes to all of the things that have been said in the beginning about comic books, and that are said. It's one of those things I can't stress enough, which I am very prevalent on. Myself as a conservative woman, black woman at that too, that know your audience, understand your audience, and you don't really should never judge a book by its cover, because when you run the risk of going down that road, you open up a whole lot of can of worms to where it shouldn't be there. So that's another point too. All right, so on to more facts. to have that kind of association. Hey, yeah, I have that, like, it's dapper and stylish to look like a wise guy or what have you, right? That's interesting enough. So, with this said, I am going to get into some of the facts and round out everything else. So, with the facts here, okay, so as I said here, I'm gonna go through this. So, now, Dark Horse Comics which was published under Mike Richard and developed by the writer John Arcudi, and the artist was Doug Mackey. So it originally was presented as a Masquerade in '87, and so the origin started in 1985, and also with the aspects of shape-shifting is very pronounced into this. And it might, not to get on a tangent, but it might be one of those weird theories, when I discover and find more about fan theories of the comic book, and then go back and rehash it again with the mask, that something, because I found that interesting enough, something to do with how Necronomicon, and then again the aspects of how maybe Stephen King, the world of Stephen King might be connected. You never know. But anyway, let's get back to this. It says, and so with Stanley Ipkiss is how, again, is how everything is sorted out, because with Stanley Ipkiss and the disposition in which he found it, and which I understand they were saying, and I'll link all the other sources, were saying that, when he found this power, it gave him Looney Tunes, cartoon-like, abilities in order to transform, which is quite interesting because it's making another commentary of the impact that violence and cartoons had on expelling that too, making commentary about that too, because when you look back at Looney Tunes, a lot of the scenes were very pronounced in the aspects of cartoon violence, and then so they, which is Dark Horse, a lot of the comic books that came out from this division of comics made a lot of heavy commentary on the aspects of the dark aftermath of something. So making a lot of, again, with the Looney Tunes and the popularity of it, what if there is a horrible reality situation where cartoon violence is ultimately very brutal and disgusting. And so this was very pronounced, when we see what with Stanley Ipkiss and everything, and then translating this back again into Lieutenant Mitch and Calloway and everything, what his story and his transformation, and ultimately setting it up for the mask at the end to come back again. And then Kathy is, the girlfriend who was in between all this stuff too. Stanley Ipkiss' girlfriend, and then resurfacing back again in 1991 with the lieutenant, and trying to be the one to stop and warn, but ultimately, crap hit the fan and it didn't go on so well. So, the crossovers and revivals. So the series was concluded and initially run with also a 2000 crossover in the DC Comics, The Joker, and the Joker Mask, and was later revived with a series like Itty Bitty Mask and I Pledge Allegiance to the Mask in 2019. Alright, so I think The Son of the Mask was one of those things where, to end on my commentary about all of this, was, hey, we're going to milk the franchise for all it's worth and make money. I don't think they were really taking it serious. I think it was one of those things where it was just a money grab to me, and that's interesting enough. How that goes with what is ultimately one of the reasons why a lot of times comic books are adapted, especially when we get into superhero attributes aren't seen or taken as serious or in aspects of respect, because it's associated. Oh yeah, that's that popcorn fodder stuff, whatever. And that's something interesting in itself, how that relates to the impact and the commentary about the mask and the lineage in the story. So with this said, this reaches the end. I would greatly like to know what you all think. Feel free to reach out to me. 2 ways, as I said in the beginning, is through email and YouTube. Alright, so this reaches the end of Harbor Light. Tune in, turn up, and definitely take care out there. Bye-bye for now.